So the Stargate franchise started out with humans discovering an ancient device called a Stargate and began exploring worlds through these. But over time, as the series progresses on, the humans here, which are called the Tauri of Earth, started to explore space and beyond with the use of spaceships that contain reverse-engineered alien technology. And with this came a new element to the show, the era of void battles and alien fleets. Of course, they were always there from the first place, with the Goa'uld attacks and the Asgard ships, but these space navies became more prominent after the introduction of Earth's own battlecruisers. So anyway, here in this universe, there are many alien races, with each of them having their own separate fleets of spaceships and different types of technology. And that is where we come in. Here we have, with our best of our knowledge and research, arranged the 10 biggest space fleets of the Stargate universe. Let's get banging. At number 10 we have the Tauri fleet. So this began as a desperate effort by Earth to defend itself using whatever alien technology it could study and reverse engineer. After the failed X-301 interceptor, Earth successfully developed a fully human-built F-302 fighter, which became the backbone of its starfighter forces and then later were based on both warships and off-world bases. The next major step was the BC-303 Prometheus, Earth's first battlecruiser, which proved that humanity could build interstellar warships even if it was still weaker than the vessels of major galactic powers. With extensive technological assistance from the Asgard, the Tauri then created the far more advanced Daedalus-class BC-304 battlecruisers, which transformed Earth from a vulnerable world into one of the strongest military powers in the Milky Way galaxy, and even stretching its influence to the Pegasus galaxy. During its peak, it had 6 battlecruisers and hundreds of fighters, a far cry from being a major naval power in any sci-fi universe, but it had the advanced tech of the Asgard and the Ancients to back it up. But by the end of the series, the Tauri arsenal had gone down due to losses, but it was still a premier fighting force, although limited by numbers. Number 9. The Ori fleet. So the Ori fleet was much smaller than most major galactic navies, but it made up for its limited numbers with overwhelming technological superiority. During the Ori Crusade, the invasion of the Milky Way galaxy, the fleet appears to have consisted of only 4 massive Ori warships supported by around 2,000 Ori fighters. Yet even this relatively small force was enough to threaten the entire Milky Way galaxy. The fleet's main strength came from its gigantic Ori warships, which included vessels like the Light of Origin and several unnamed battlecruisers that crossed from the Ori galaxy through the Supergate. At approximately 1,100 meters long, these ships were amongst the largest and most powerful warships encountered by the Tauri. They even dwarfed the Daedalus-class and vastly outperformed even Hattak motherships. Each warship carried thousands of soldiers, hundreds of transport rings, advanced shielding, powerful beam weapons which are capable of destroying Hattaks in a single shot, and a complement of around 500 fighters each. Their shields were so powerful that entire fleets could barely scratch them, making them seem almost invincible until the Tauri acquired the advanced Asgard plasma beam weapons for the Odyssey ship, which then turned the tide of the battle. At number 8 we have the Free Jaffa Nation fleet. The Free Jaffa fleet was created from the remains of the old Goa'uld Empire, after the Jaffa won their freedom and established the Free Jaffa Nation. Instead of building entirely new warships, the Jaffa inherited and took control of many vessels that had once served the Goa'uld System Lords. At the time of the Battle of Dakara, the rebel Jaffa fleet consisted of approximately 5 Hattak motherships, 8 Alkesh bombers and 10 squadrons of death gliders. But these numbers grew substantially more as more Jaffa defected from their former masters and joined the new nation. The fleet's largest contingent was made up of Hattak motherships, the iconic pyramid-shaped capital ships that formed the backbone of the Goa'uld military power for thousands of years. By the era of the Ori Crusade, the Free Jaffa possessed dozens of inherited warships and thousands of personnel which are spread across the Hattaks, the Alkesh bombers and the Death Gliders. While the technology was no longer the most advanced compared to Tauri BC-304s or the Ori warships, the Free Jaffa fleet remained a major galactic power due to their large numbers and extensive combat experience. Number 7. The Nakai fleet. So the Nakai fleet remains one of the most mysterious military forces encountered in the Stargate universe, because neither the true size of the Nakai civilization nor the full strength of its navy was ever revealed. During the journey of the ancient starship called Destiny, only a handful of Nakai vessels were directly observed. including at least 4 confirmed Nakai motherships operating together and numerous fighter craft launched from their hangar bays. However, there was no evidence that these ships represented the entirety of their fleet. They may have been merely a scouting force, a task group, or a small fraction of a much bigger intergalactic civilization. The backbone of the fleet, however, was the massive Nakai motherships, which are heavily shielded warships capable of hyperspace travel, carrying large number of fighters and boarding troops while mounting a powerful forward energy weapon, although it wasn't really that powerful because it wasn't able to penetrate the shielding of the Destiny. And number 6. The Asuran fleet was one of the most technologically advanced navies in the Pegasus galaxy because it was built by the Asurans, which are artificial beings created by the ancients who copied much of the Lantean technology and their ship designs. Their fleet was essentially a robotic imitation of the ancient Lantean navy, with its main strength coming from the large numbers of Aurora-class warships and the smaller Asuran cruisers. During the Asuran Wraith War and later conflicts with Atlantis, the Asurans constructed an enormous fleet at a rate that no organic civilization could match. At least 17 Aurora-class battleships were confirmed to have been built initially, all of which were destroyed by the Horizon weapon, the nukes. But the Asurans quickly replaced their losses and eventually rebuilt as many as 38 additional warships. This meant that their known fleet most likely reached at least 60 Aurora vessels during the peak, along with dozens of smaller cruisers and other attack crafts. The largest contingent of the fleet was therefore the Aurora-class warship force, which are supported by smaller cruisers which are used for patrol, pursuit and combat operations. Number 5. The Asgard fleet. This was arguably one of the most technologically advanced conventional navies in the Milky Way and Ida galaxies. They serve as both the military and exploration arm of the highly advanced Asgard civilization. Despite numbering only around 100 vessels at its peak, the fleet possessed such overwhelming technological superiority that a single major Asgard warship could often defeat 4 or 5 Hatak motherships on its own. Unlike most galactic powers, the Asgard relied on quality rather than quantity, fielding highly automated ships that could be operated by just a few or maybe even just one crew member. The fleet included several classes of vessels such as scouts, transport, science ships, cruisers, chariots, and bombers, but its largest and most powerful contingent consisted of the famous Bilskirner-class and the later O'Neill-class motherships. Although the ultimate fate of most of the fleet remains uncertain following the Asgard extinction, it is generally accepted that the majority of these vessels were destroyed, along with their civilization, which left only their technological legacy that they passed on to the Tauri aboard the Odyssey. Number 4. The ancient or the Lantean fleet was the most powerful and the most technologically sophisticated naval force known in the Stargate Universe, spanning multiple eras and at least 3 galaxies over millions of years. Beginning with the early Altaran vessels and later including legendary ships like the Destiny, the Seed Ship, the massive Aurora-class battleship and the city-sized Atlantis ships, the ancient fleet represented the pinnacle of conventional spacefaring technology. The largest contingent of their military forces were almost certainly the Aurora-class battleship fleet, which served as the backbone of the ancient war effort against the Wraith in the Pegasus galaxy. Supporting these warships were city ships, cruisers, transport, science vessels, freighters, and thousands of smaller craft like puddle jumpers. Because the ancients were intergalactic, it's highly unlikely that the handful of ships that were seen on screen represented anything close to their true strength. While Stargate never provides definitive numbers, a reasonable interpretation of their setting suggests that at their peak, the ancients likely possessed hundreds of major starships and city ships spread across multiple galaxies supported by countless smaller vessels. On the third spot, we have the Replicator fleet. So this was one of the most dangerous and the most rapidly expanding military forces in Stargate because, unlike traditional civilizations, the Replicators did not need shipyards, governments, nor even populations to build their navy. Instead, they consumed any available technology and raw materials, converting them into more replicators and then more warships. Their fleet consisted of purpose-built vessels like the Spider ships and numerous replicator cruisers which were small, but a large portion of their strength came from commandeering enemy vessels that were infested, upgraded, and integrated into a replicator collective. During their war against the Asgard, they captured dozens of Asgard ships and incorporated their advanced technology into the fleet. Later, during their invasion of the Milky Way galaxy, they seized and enhanced dozens of attack vessels as well. As a result, the largest contingent of the Replicator Navy was likely composed of captured enemy warships, and then also the hundreds of native spider ships and cruisers of theirs. Number 2. The Goa'uld Fleet. This was the dominant military force in the Milky Way galaxy for thousands of years. They were built around the iconic Hatak motherships. Rather than operating as a unified navy though, the fleet was divided amongst the various system lords, each of whom controlled their own territories, armies and warships. Their main ship was the Hataks, the Pyramid ships and the Alkesh bombers, as well as the Death Gliders. Individual system lords typically commanded anywhere from 2 to 24 Hataks, with U controlling 16 and warlords like Apophis and Anubis fielding 10 and 30 ships respectively. Then at the Battle of Dakara, Baal alone commanded over 40 Hataks. Early in the series, Thor suggested that the system lords collectively possessed roughly 200 Hataks, but the statement came years before the rise of Anubis and the massive military expansion that followed. At the height of the Goa'uld power during the early years of Stargate SG-1, the combined fleets of all the system lords may have been around between 300 to 500 Hataks. However, along with these numbers were the thousands of Death Gliders and Alkesh bombers, which would have made the Goa'uld fleet a superpower in the Milky Way galaxy just by their size of the combined fleets alone. And number 1, the Wraith fleet. So this was the largest military force ever seen in the Pegasus galaxy and maybe even in the Milky Way. Despite being technologically inferior to the fleets of the Ancients, they ultimately won the Lantean Wraith War through overwhelming numbers and relentless attrition. Wraith vessels were unique because they were not manufactured in shipyards, but they were biologically grown from specialized organic material, which produced living warships that could regenerate damage and be rapidly expanded when resources were available. The backbone of the fleet were the massive Hive Ship, supported by cruisers, scout ships, supply vessels, and the enormous numbers of dart fighters used for combat and for culling operations. During the Ancient War, the exact numbers were never given, but the scale of the conflict alone strongly suggests that the Wraith fleet at its peak numbered in the thousands of Hive ships and many thousands more of cruisers and support vessels. Considering they fought and eventually defeated an intergalactic spanning ancient civilization over a century-long war, anything less would be difficult to reconcile with the outcome which is shown in canon. In the modern day though, their fleet was said to consist of only 60 main Hive ships and also maybe hundreds of fighters, but they never really reached the same peak of performance or strength as they did when they fought the Ancients. And so from the Tauri to the Ancients to the Asgard and now to the Wraith fleets, these are the biggest space navies in Stargate. So with that we end this video. Do hit that like button for support and also click that bell button for regular updates on new video uploads. Also subscribe to be a part of Legion Notebook. So till the next time, take care boys.